Welcome, grade 12 scholars. My name is Miss Novak, and I'm ready to engage with you in week 5, lesson 24 of your ELA online distance learning. What can you expect? You probably know exactly what I'm about to say. Some variety in these lessons. You'll also be able to see a list of materials and resources that you'll need. Of course, an overview of the learning of the lesson. We'll engage in a model of one of the tasks that you're expected to complete. And we'll always preview the learning for the next day's lesson. In this case, next week's lesson. In our last lesson, we finished closely reading this week's text, A History of the English Church and People, and we learned about some of the differences that Bede observed between Ireland and Britain. Today, we'll analyze the text by reading it and thinking about whether all the details Bede included in the text were true. We'll end by connecting the text to the essential question of the unit, which really excites me. At any rate, we need this video link, ELA G12W5L24, the text, which we have inside of our learning packets. And again, our task for today will be to analyze details and then connect them to the essential question. So let's get ourselves started. Preparing ourselves is essential, so make sure that we prepare ourselves to share today's learning, that we know where to find our fluency practice, and that also we have our independent reading book on hand. Some of you might be completing your independent reading immediately following the lesson, and that's quite all right. Whatever works for you. Our daily pictogram. So let's see here. It's the word puzzle of the day. Let's take a look at this image and think about what words or phrases this brings up for us. You can take 15 seconds to analyze this. You might need to pause the video. You need to wake up a little bit, but we'll engage in the answer on the next slide. And the answer is mind over matter. I think this was the easiest one yet. I don't know about you, but mind over matter means we're going to persevere even when there might be some physical exhaustion. We're going to tell ourselves it's all right. Here we go. Let's get into today's learning. Not that you'll need that mindset because today's learning is fun, but let's go. The materials and resources that you'll need for this lesson, of course, are found in here. Lesson 24 is on page 75. The note catcher is on page 76. Your text, pages 64 to 66. And as always, make sure you have something to write with and also something to highlight with. I'm telling you, it has helped me a great deal in keeping things straight and introducing new facts. Make sure to get these materials out now. Pause the video if you have to do this. This slide is extra exciting today because we are going to be connecting the unit's essential question to our writing assignment at the end of today's lesson. Just as a review, the text we're reading is A History of the English Church and People. Bede is the author. Our essential question, if we don't already know it by heart, which we should, what does it mean to call a place home? And our guiding questions, what makes a place important enough to write about? And in what ways is home both a place and a state of mind? Let's take some time to get ourselves situated in our learning. Our learning target for today, if you'd like to read it together, is I can evaluate different types of information in a historical text, and I can connect a text to the unit's essential question. So this is a really heavy one, but because we already know so much about the text and the background of the text, I think this should be a pretty easy learning target to achieve. Let's get started. Let's move through the overview of today's lesson. Now, I know I said this in lessons before, but sometimes I even annotate the lesson overview, especially if I start to have any questions about the task at hand. But since we're together, let's clarify. Today, we will start with a quick jumpstart activity about the types of information you would expect to see in historical text. Then you'll analyze the text by rereading it and marking examples of different types of information. As you'll reread, you'll see that not all of the details in the piece are facts. Remember, we knew this. You'll talk to someone about the revelation and whether it was right for Bede to include details that were not true in historical context. Finally, you'll write a response connecting this text to the essential question of the unit. what does it mean to call a place home? This is a culminating lesson, so let's get ourselves excited to share our learning and to arrive at some pretty solid conclusions. Let's start with the thinking component of today's lesson, the Jumpstart activity. Think about your history or social studies classes. When you're learning about a new place, is it important to you that the information you read is true? Let's read the writing prompt on the screen and in your lesson plan, and then answer it by writing a few sentences in your note catcher. Again, this writing prompt is, when reading the history of a particular place, what kinds of information do you expect to find? And is it important to you that the information is factual? Another word for factual is true. Take some minutes here, pause the video, and complete this task. All right, welcome back. Now let's launch into our close reading of the text. But first, let's make sure we're very clear about what we are looking for. My guess is that when you are learning about a new place or topic, you want to know the facts. Or if the author includes something that's not true, you'd like for them to tell you that it's not true. And while the inclusion of only facts is something that we have come to expect from nonfiction texts today, this wasn't always the case, especially in Bede's time. Remember, people were more superstitious then, and with many people being illiterate, there wasn't a lot of reading material around, and people were less informed, so they might have been more inclined to believe what was written. Authors were also more likely to include their biases and beliefs in their texts, in addition to rumors or even incorrect information. Let's think back to that paragraph 3. Remember how he included an exact quotation from that time? He couldn't have the exact wording correct. And there are other instances of untrue or exaggerated statements in the text, and it's our job today to be able to lift them up and to distinguish them from fact. That will be our task today. As you analyze the text, identify those facts that you find and mark the details in the text that you believe to be superstition or personal beliefs. After marking, please make sure that you include these in the boxes provided in your note catcher. I'll show you an example in the next slide of what this might look like before you fully invest yourself in this activity. Let's move back to paragraph 4. Now remember, paragraph 4 focused on reptiles. Let's look at the part where the author talked about the reptiles not being able to survive in Ireland. No reptiles could survive there. We know this isn't true, right? We would have to, especially the part about the animals dying once they breathe the scented air of the country. This is a superstition that many people must have believed in Bede's day. And so I added it to the note catcher as something that is probably superstitious in nature. Let's go ahead and pause the video now and move through the same type of activity with the text. Some of you may have already finished your rereading, and that's great. Please note that once you're done rereading and taking notes, you'll share your findings with a family member, caregiver, or friend. You'll also tell them if you think it was right for Bede to include these types of details in a historical text. To end the lesson today, and as your culminating writing exercise, you'll think about what this text has taught you about the meaning of home, and answer the essential question of the unit using details from this text. Again, the essential question is, what does it mean to call a place home? Making explicit reference to the text by lifting up lines is a really great way to practice sophisticated writing. Pause the video now and finish up your learning for today. If you have any questions that are remaining after engaging in today's learning activities, feel free to reach out to your teacher. Their first name, their last name at detroitk12.org is their email address. I'm sure they would love to answer your questions. In our next lesson, we will begin reading a new text, a fictional story called The Buried Giant, and we will focus on completing a first read of the story and then summarizing it. Our learning target is I can read and summarize a narrative text. Now, narrative texts are something that we've moved away from, right, in lessons prior, but we're ready to re-engage in this type of writing next week. Looking forward to it. We are ending this week on a positive note. Thank you so much for learning with me today and this week. Couple quick reminders: make sure that you're talking about this lesson with someone else, and also read for 20 minutes and document your reading activity to build that momentum in your reading log and, of course, your fluency practice. See how much you've improved over the course of this week with both your reading speed and accuracy, not to mention comprehension. We'll see you soon.